Hey guys, so today a post on Reddit has been blowing up, and this post talks about the perspective of people unhappy with Tier 4. Now, as I mentioned before, Tier 4 is definitely very divisive. Some people are on the side of, I love Tier 4, this is a great thing for the game, and other people are really on the side of, this is the worst thing for the game ever, I'm quitting. Like, there's not really too much people who are in between. Now, I think it makes sense because Tier 4 is a big change in the game. And with this, a lot of people haven't experienced a change like this in basically their entirety of playing Lost Ark. The people who have played since the beginning, Tier 1, have experienced this multiple times over, and the people who have recently played and have only been in Tier 3 have never experienced anything like this. Now, I'm not saying that the only people who are unhappy with it are the people who have never experienced it before, but I do think that that does have a big factor to play into it. But additionally, I think there's another factor that we aren't really talking about that I wanted to bring up today. So taking a look at this post, he is basically saying like there's a lot of people saying that anybody with a negative opinion about Tier 4 is basically an RM tier or a whale who's losing their investment, right? And he wants to come and say, look, I'm currently roster 169, been playing the game for 2.5 hours, and I've been pretty free to play plus basically. And he talks about his history, about going through Brel, stopping playing, coming back for Jumpstart, and just talk about the general struggles with the game, about like how there's a lot of grind, about how there's a lot of work that goes into building your characters, and that compared to games like, he's talking about here, Destiny 2, Guild Wars 2, Warframe, none of these games ever took this long and this much of a grind and this much of constantly doing things every day to get to the end game, which I completely understand. And he feels like he's been putting so much work into the game and he's finally kind of catching up in T3. But then, boom, they announced that T4 is coming, right? So it makes him feel like a lot of his work that he put into the game is going and becoming nothing because it's no longer the end game anymore. And while I do sympathize and empathize with the people who are feeling this, I think that the main reason why a lot of people who are in this situation, right, the specific situation of this OP, what they're feeling, is because of the difference between Korean MMOs and Western MMOs. While this person does kind of clump everything into MMOs, right? He's saying that people are telling him, it's an MMO, what do you expect? And he's like, well, I've played MMOs before, like Destiny 2, Guild Wars 2, Warframe, and nothing was like this. And I think that that is a really important distinction that we need to make, because all of these MMOs he mentions are Western MMOs. Destiny 2, Western created. Guild Wars 2, Western created. And Warframe, which is also another Western game. And now, I wouldn't really call Warframe an MMO, to be honest, and I'm not even sure if I'd really call D2 as much of an MMO. Maybe it's like a non-traditional MMO, but I think Warframe I probably wouldn't call an MMO. But either way, these are all Western-created games suited for a Western audience. And none of these are a Korean game, or specifically a Korean MMO. And that, at the end of the day, I think is why this OP, and along with a lot of other people who are in the comments agreeing with him, and a lot of you guys who are feeling unhappy about T4, are probably feeling the way you are right now. Because there really is a distinction between how a Korean MMO plays compared to a lot of other MMOs outside of Korea. Korean MMOs are typically the type of games where you are forced to interact with a lot of pay-to-win features. You're forced to interact with a game that requires you to grind a ton and play in and day out. You're forced to deal with a game where there are a lot of RNG features. And while Western MMOs typically are kind of like this model, like the Guild Wars 2 model or the World of Warcraft model, where you play the game for maybe 2-3 months after an expansion, you get everything that you need, and then you just kind of stop playing, or you can go and continue playing your dailies, but they're really not contributing too much to the overall power level of your character. You might be able to increase your power level by a little bit or prepare for the next expansion, but overall, you don't have to keep playing the game every day until the next expansion comes out. In many ways, kind of like seasons in like a game like Diablo or something like that. You can just play it for a couple months, stop, and then pick it back up later on. Whereas a Korean MMO doesn't let you do that. And while many of you guys are like, well, that's just bad game design, right? For me personally, I actually love that. Maybe less so the pay to win features, right? I think that's kind of like a sad, I guess, thing that we have to deal with when we're playing Korean MMOs. But I do love the fact that I have something to work towards every single day I open up a game like Lost Ark. I do love the fact that there are these RNG features. Yes, I do like the RNG. Sometimes it does suck, but when you think about it this way, in order to have high highs, you have to have low lows. You can't have like middling lows and high highs. It just doesn't work like that because the highs are just not that much higher than the lows, right? So you have to have a game that has low lows and high highs in order to kind of create that feeling. And also, let's face it, at the end of the day, the RNG is kind of like gambling. It is gambling. And who doesn't like gambling, right? At least, well, I love gambling. So that it is what it is, right? But all this is to say that I personally don't think that it's really a bad game design in certain ways. I think that it really is just a different type of game compared to these Western MMOs. It's kind of like how, an ARPG like Diablo is very different from an RPG like Dragon Quest, right? They're two games that are both RPGs, but they play very similar, which is why we have the term ARPG versus just a classical RPG or a JRPG, right? Which is why I think we really need to get away from this idea that Lost Ark is just another MMO. We need to separate it out and say Lost Ark is a Korean MMO and these other games are Western MMOs. I think that separation will just make it a lot simpler and a lot easier to understand why people are feeling frustrated about these systems in the game. Now, I'm not going to say it's perfect. I'm not going to say Korean MMOs are perfect, but I will say that I do love playing Korean MMOs. And in my history of playing MMOs, I have spent the most time playing Korean MMOs and have barely spent any time playing Western MMOs just because I don't find them fun. If we think back to my history of MMOs, right? I've spent the most time playing MapleStory and Lost Ark, both Korean MMOs. I've also played more of some obscure Korean MMOs, like one called Seal Online, which I loved a lot as a kid. And also there's another really, really, really obscure MMO called Ace Online, Air Rivals, Space Cowboys. There's been a couple iterations because it's been dropped and repicked up by publishers over time quite a few times. But unfortunately, that game is kind of dead these days. It's still alive, but like the server's still running, but the game is kind of dead. But I do still think that that is one of the best MMOs I've ever played in my history of playing MMOs. So I do wish it was still alive. But that's besides the point, right? As you can see, those are the games that I've spent the most time playing in terms of MMOs, and they're all Korean MMOs. Whereas games like RuneScape, games like Guild Wars, games like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, I've dabbled in all of them, and they just don't scratch that same itch that these other Korean MMOs give me. They just don't give me that dopamine rush. They don't make me feel like playing the game day in, day out. They just aren't satisfying to me. And that's why I really think there needs to be a distinction between Korean MMOs and Western MMOs, or just other MMOs in general. And if we're able to have that distinction, I think it'll help a lot of people really realize that, the reason why they're feeling unhappy with Lost Ark or happy with Lost Ark. So unfortunately, the sad news is that for the OP here, I am going to let you know that it's probably best just to not play Lost Ark in the future. It is what it is. Even though you might like the combat of Lost Ark, the raiding in Lost Ark, all of that stuff, right? The systems in the game will always stay the same because it is a Korean MMO, and that's how Korean MMOs work. So it's probably just better for you to stop playing a game like Lost Ark. Don't even look at Throne and Liberty, and go play a game like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2 or something like that. Those are probably going to have systems that are more akin to what you're used to and what you like playing. But for everybody else, who does like Korean MMOs, Lost Ark is probably a very, very fun game for you. Again, they're gonna make mistakes. They're gonna do things that are really against our Western practices, but if they're able to kind of skirt that line where it's like just Western enough and like, you know, still retaining some of those Korean features, I think that it'll be a very successful game for those people who are enjoying those types of games here in the West. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you think that a lot of these people just don't understand what a Korean MMO is versus a Western MMO? And as always, if you enjoyed the video, please remember to hit the like button, hit the sub button, ring the bell for notifications, and also I stream every single night on twitch.tv/MisoxShiru. So hopefully I see you guys there. And also another thing is that I'm having a podcast with Benji and Memo this week talking about post Loa on thoughts. The date isn't finalized yet, but it's likely going to be on the later half of this week. So hopefully I see you guys there as well. But if not, hopefully I'll see y'all on the next video. All right, guys. Peace out.